Everyone, welcome to our second round of book talks. My name is Lauren and I'm the head of borrower services at the Reading Public Library, and I'm joined here today by Suzanne, who is one of our wonderful substitute librarians. She works in children's and reference. Allison, who is a senior library associate in the technical services department. And Olivia, who is one of our children's librarians. We're really excited to talk to you today about some of the books that we're reading, and we are happy that you're here to join us today. Suzanne will be starting us off. Take it away, Suzanne.
Okay. Well, when I heard that the library was closing because of the need for social distancing, I ran right out to the building and I checked out all the books that I could carry, came out with 2 armloads of books thinking this will keep me busy for a long, long time, and it didn't work. The books that I normally like, which are mysteries and thrillers and intense relationship dramas, were all so depressing. I could not read them. I'd pick up a book and I'd put it down. And then I found myself reading to grandchildren on a computer using FaceTime. And what did they most like but this? James Harriet's Treasury for Children, which is a book of 8 animal stories written by a veterinarian in England back in the 1930s. This was a book that I had actually bought for the children at White Lamb Books back in the fall, thinking I'd give it to them for a Christmas gift. And then I thought, well, they're only 6 and 3. They're a little young. I'll save it for a while. And good thing I did, because we have now read every one of these 8 stories 3 times, and we're starting on our 4th round. As you can see, it's a beautifully illustrated book. The stories are gentle, they're mild, they're all about animals. They all have happy endings, which is what we need right now. And then I got thinking, James Harriet, of course he was famous for writing books for adults a long time ago. So I went to the library website, and lo and behold, you can still download the best and most favorite one of all Creatures Great and Small. This was first released almost 50 years ago. So I started reading this, and oh, happiness, true happiness. These are delightful human interest stories, full of humor. I calmed right down. I went to my happy place. I'm going to keep reading this for a long, long time. You can borrow this through the library by going to their website and using the Overdrive or the Libby app. You can have it as an ebook, which you can read on your computer, your phone, your tablet, whatever. You can also have it as an audiobook and listen to it with a wonderful English accent. All right, what is Allison reading now?
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. I am reading, I read an amazing book by David McCullough, who we all love and cherish, and it was published back in 2001, but it's relevant today. It's Path Between the Seas, about the building of the Panama Canal. And I loved this book, although we did not have a very friendly start. Initially, I was heading to the Panama Canal and felt I needed to have the history behind me in order to really appreciate the entire trip, and pulled the book from the shelves at the library and realized that this was going to be the most tedious reading, and the month I had before my trip was not going to get me through it at the speed I read. And so, lo and behold, went to Libby and I downloaded it and I put it on my phone, and I could listen to it when I walked every day. I could listen to it as I was cooking around the kitchen, and it was the best. Once you get into the book and you kind of understand the language he wrote, it was a book that took place at the turn of the century into the 1900s when the Panama Canal was being built. And the book focuses primarily on the digging and the people and the engineering and the money and the finance. And it's really fascinating and sad, and how the railroad industry was coming into being in America. And then the railroad in Panama was what made the canal possible, and how the steel industry and the iron industry were growing, and technology was growing, and the California gold rush was happening, and getting through to California without having to take a wagon train without having to get across the country until the train was finally built cross-continental. So I was absolutely enamored and thrilled that it was available to me, not only downloadable in a book, but also downloadable in audio. And now I think I'd like to hand it off to Lauren.
My first recommendation is a book that I'm currently reading. I'm not finished with it yet. It's called The Resistors by Gish Jen. This is a great book for fans of Divergent or other kind of futuristic and dystopian stories. It takes place in the future where a lot of our jobs have been automated, so there are a lot of people that don't have jobs anymore, and the income divide is even more greatly divided than it is today. It centers around a family whose teenage daughter is a bit of a baseball prodigy, and they start an underground baseball league, which soon the big brother of society seems to have found out about, and so they start their own baseball league. And that's where I am in the story right now, but it's really engaging. The characters are really interesting. The social commentary is really interesting. So I am really enjoying it. I do want to mention that if you borrow it, it is available on Libby. And if you borrow it, it'll have a better than this. This is an advanced copy, which is why it's just blue. So it'll be a little more recognizable when you see it online. I'm going to pass it off to Olivia. What are you reading now?
Right now, I am reading Trick Mirror by Gia Tolentino. And Gia Tolentino has been described as the Joan Didion of millennial writers. Trick Mirror critically looks at the cultural trends of the early millennium and the consequences of those trends today. Looking at our interests, Tolentino writes about the complexity of being a human with a personality that relies on cultural trends, but also how cultural trends rely on our personalities to form. In the first essay of the collection, I was struck by her observation that because of the internet, we have to make every single thing that we do personal. So we have to gain empathy, we have to make it personal. Twitter is personal, all of social media is personal, book reviews have become personal. I'm making this book review personal by writing about my take on it. Tolentino herself is self-aware. She writes how she has to insert bits of her personality and parts of her memoir into these essays in order to make them more palpable for our demographic and our IUs as millennials. I highly recommend this book as an audiobook or an ebook, which are both available on Libby, if you want to just like scream for 5 hours, because Tolentino points out parts of our media culture that has like essentially created our entire personas. And it makes you rethink everything you want to post on social media. As someone who was on social media since they were in 7th grade, this book gives me nightmares, as well as points out things I should be more wary of. So if you want to scream with me or whatever, please check out this book. I'm going to continue to scream about it and rave about it as we pass it over to Suzanne.
Well, now that I've got this downloadable books business down, I went back to the library website and said, what else can I find? I need comedy. I need something lighthearted and entertaining. And I found this. This is called Funny, You Don't Look Autistic, A Comedian's Guide to Life on the Spectrum. The author is Michael McCreary. He's still in his early 20s. He's a young man who is somewhere on the autism spectrum. A few years ago, we would have said that he has Asperger's syndrome. Right now, he makes his living as a stand-up comic, which is quite wonderful. I found this a very poignant and entertaining read. He writes a great deal about what it was like to grow up as a youngster who was different from everyone else, which is often hard. He writes about having a very loving and supportive family. He writes about going to a summer camp where he was encouraged to put his wonderful verbal skills to use on a stage. It's a very good introduction to the varying ways in which autism can manifest in different people. Michael McCreary is quite high functioning, obviously. He also had a brother who was also autistic, but who was totally nonverbal, which would be a lot harder. I follow Michael McCreary now on Facebook, and I get a daily laugh from his posts. The guy is a hoot and half. I think he's quite wonderful. This is also available as an ebook. You can download them both from the library's website. Allison.
Well, hi, me again. Now I want to follow up with another book I read before going to the Panama Canal called Panama Fever by Matthew Parker. This book is a much easier read because it's not quite as technical and it doesn't have quite as much about the engineering because it focuses on the politics of the time and the finances of the time and how the 1900s with technology like railroad and travel and medicine was growing at the time. Walter Reed was down in Cuba initially trying to resolve yellow fever, which they then brought to Panama. So he talks more about the background in politics and medicine more than whereas Path Between the Seas by McCullough talked about the engineering feat and sadly the stubbornness of governments to throw money at a problem. I'm in love with both of these authors who really brought a comprehensive story. I did read this book, but it is available for you as a downloadable. And now, off to Lauren.
Thanks, Allison. My next book is another novel. It's called The Glass Hotel. This is by Emily St. John Mandel. You might recognize her name as the author of Station 11, which was really popular a few years ago. This was a really anticipated book. I really enjoyed it. Some people who were Station 11 didn't enjoy it as much because it's different. It's a much different story, and I think people were sort of expecting a little bit more of the same, and the author did something totally different for this book. I really enjoyed it, but don't expect Station 11. It centers on the story of a woman named Vincent, and she is born on a very remote island off of the coast of Vancouver, but her life takes her to Toronto, to New York, to Dubai. She has a really interesting story, and I very much enjoyed it. It was very, a little bit moody. It was very atmospheric, and I really got drawn into this story right now, which was nice to have a bit of an escape. So I would highly recommend it. It is available on Libby as well in ebook and audiobook. Olivia, your turn.
I want to talk about two books that are actually in the new adult category of literature. New adult is capital N, capital A. New adult books are often found in teen sections, but they actually feature characters who are ages 18 to 26, who are essentially becoming new adults. So the first one I want to talk about and the second one I want to talk about are by the same author. They follow the same two characters. The first is I Hate Everyone But You. The second is Please Send Help, both by Gabby Dunn and Allison Raskin. They take place in pivotal moments in both these characters' lives. In I Hate Everyone But You, Jen and Ava set off to college on opposite sides of the country. They have been best friends since they were kids. They experience the growing pains of adolescence, being apart from each other and their families, and moving to new states, and also the loneliness of your first year of college. In Please Send Help, Ava and Jen have graduated college, and they are moved to new states, still very far apart from each other, and they are dealing with their first jobs and first internships, and they start forming concrete identities and self-identities in their sexualities, confidences, and understanding their own mental health. Both of these books are told in epistolary form, which means that they're told through emails and texts. They're great insights into what new adults could be, new adult books could be, and they are not necessarily about being teenagers, but growing into what it means to be an adult in today's society. They are both based on Raskin and Dunn's friendships, and they're funny, realistic, and a great way to spend the day reading or listening to them on Libby. So let's hear another pick from Suzanne.
Well, last month I was truly missing the library's evening book discussions. I had already borrowed and read a copy of this book, which is called The Book Woman of Troublesome Creek. The author is Kim Michelle Richardson. I was looking forward to an April 21st discussion that Sarah Fennelly was going to lead, and then the library closed. So I will share this book with you folks instead. I found this an extremely interesting piece of historical fiction. It's about the 1930s pack horse librarians. This one is set in Kentucky. It's about a woman who carried books up into the hills of Appalachia on horseback. But what I found the most interesting thing about this book was that the main character, Cussie Mary, is one of the blue people of that region. I had to go and do some research. This was a real thing. There were people, may possibly still be, people in Appalachia who, because of a rare genetic defect, had skin that appeared blue. The book is full of vivid historical detail, lots and lots of drama. One of the more interesting things was that the blue people were discriminated against because they appeared to be non-white, which was pretty horrifying all by itself. Gave me a lot to think about. It ends in such a way that there's hope that there might be a sequel. I would read it if there was a sequel. This is another one that you can borrow from the library's website and read it as an ebook or listen as an audiobook. Okay.
All right, guys. As you can see, there's a bookmark in this one because I'm about 4 pages from the end. And this is Carol Emshwiller. I mean, how fun is it to say her last name, Emshwiller? And she has kind of almost created a new genre, although I will say that Margaret Atwood and there's a couple others, it's magical realism. So this is a series of short stories. And to be honest, I don't usually go for the short stories, but I grabbed it as I was leaving the library a month and a half ago in order to have something that I might be able to read in snippets. And it's not just a book you read in snippets, it's a you can't put this book down, you want more stories from her. Amazing. She talks about what if your grandmother was a superhero and growing up with your grandmother? Or what if you were tasked with raising an orphan who was a gorilla and the next lethal weapon, except you raised him to read books and pick flowers? It's just got settings. And as I was getting to this last story, it was about me. It was about a grandma and how her adult kids and her grandchildren see her. But it's all written in such train of consciousness, amazing style. She's a writer. She's a really beautiful writer. Carol Emshwiller, short fiction. She's available downloadable. She's available at the library. So even though she's published 10 years ago, I would jump into her books. Next.
Thanks, Allison. Those sound really fun. My last recommendation for you all is called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. It is a cookbook, and it has recipes in it, but a lot of the whole first half of the book is sort of explanations about how cooking works and why you're told to do certain things in recipes. And so you actually do have to read through the whole first part of the book. The author, her name is Samin Nosrat, and I'm a huge fan of hers. I actually got to see her speak last year, and this is my personal copy. I don't buy a lot of books because I'm usually around all free ones and don't see the need, but this is a book that I bought and really cherish, and she signed it for me, which is really exciting. She also has a Netflix show of the same name, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. So if you're looking for something to watch, it'll make you forget all your cares and worries. I loved it so much. She's a wonderful host of the show, and she's a really delightful person. So if you're looking for something that is a little uplifting, I would highly recommend that and highly recommend her book. If you like Michael Pollan or any other books like that about like the Mark Kurlansky, the histories that he does about food, I think this would be the book for you. So if I have one recommendation, it's to at least check out her Netflix show. And this book is available on Libby as well, downloadable. Olivia.
All right. So speaking of uplifting books, I want to talk about I'll Be There For You, the one about the TV show Friends by Kelsey Miller. So Kelsey Miller takes us on an in-depth look of the NBC hit comedy Friends. It's available as an ebook on Libby or an audiobook on Hoopla. This book is for fans of the show or for even those who are confused by the show's lasting popularity all these years later. Miller is very generous and kind toward the show's popularity, but she does not shy away from being critical of the show and why a reunion would not work in this decade. She explores the lack of diversity, the fat phobia, the small, very, very small LGBTQ representation in the show, and what that representation looks like in the year 2020. She also looks at the history of the show, how it came together, and how it has lasted, why it lasted for 10 seasons and why it's still so popular, which she attributes to the cast's ability to work together, to riff off each other, and their pact that they made at the beginning of the show that they would all make the same amount of money every single episode, which I didn't know until I read this. So she talks about guest stars, holiday episodes, the hotly debated series finale. They're all great subjects, and she puts them all together to figure out why this show lasts so long in America's conscience. If you're missing the show because of the lack of streaming, this is a great book companion to read until you're able to watch it again. It's available as an ebook on Overdrive and Libby or audiobook on Hoopla. And actually right now I'm reading another book about the TV show Friends called Generation Friends, which is just another look into the lasting legacy of the show. This one's by Saul Austerlitz, who's a famous TV critic. This one is also available on Overdrive and Libby. So I want to thank you very much for joining us today while we talked about all the books we've been reading. You can get all of these books on Overdrive, Libby, or Hoopla. You can also buy these books at our favorite local bookstore, White Limb Books. You can visit their website and you can order books and you can get them delivered or you can pick them up. If you want to discuss the books you've been reading, if the books you've been enjoying or even not enjoying during this time, please sign up for the May 13th Let's Talk Book events on our website. The event will begin at 7 p.m. and we cannot wait to hear what you've been rereading, discovering, taking off your TBR list. We want to hear it all. So we'll see you then and thank you so much.